Okay, hey everybody. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit first about what the Green Amendment is, why it's important, how it can help Nebraska, and then Senator Dungan is going to talk a little bit about the legislative process, how we get this passed. So a little bit about me. This is something I started working on my last semester of law school. Oh my gosh, why did that happen? Sorry. um, and it was kind of just like a project that I put together on my own. And I know someone earlier was talking about cold emailing as a really useful thing. That's kind of how we got here. I wrote up a whole document on the Green Amendment, and I cold emailed the Sierra Club and was like, hey, does Nebraska have anything like this? We should do something like this. And then I ended up getting to work with Ken to do a lot of stuff with it. So highly recommend cold emailing. So the Green Amendment is a specific type of environmental rights amendment. A lot of states have environmental rights amendments, but Green Amendments are stronger, and they are important because they give you as an individual a right of action against the state. So that means that if the state is doing something to violate your right to a clean and healthy environment, you can sue. Currently, Nebraska does have a provision for clean water in the Constitution, but it doesn't have that kind of right to it. And so this is something that makes Green Amendments really unique. It has the same kind of protection as like your constitutional right to speech, something else, or to property that's protected by the Bill of Rights of the state constitution. It just gives you as an individual a little bit more power to say, hey, the state is doing something that is not good for me and my right to this, and gives you the ability to push back on that and hold the state accountable. So a couple key components of Green Amendments, they're in the Bill of Rights of a state constitution. So that just makes sure that your right to a clean and healthy environment is going to be held at the same level of importance as your right to speech or to property. And that's how you make sure that the environment doesn't get pushed down as kind of like a second fiddle to other issues. Another key part of it is that Green amendments have to be self-executing, and so that means when you pass the amendment, it's ready to go. You can use it immediately. The legislature doesn't have to do anything else with it, and this is something we've seen be kind of an issue with other legislation that's been passed before, just because if you don't get everything through, then you'll have to have the legislature go back and do some different stuff, and if you can't convince them to do that, you may have some issues. So having an amendment that is just ready to go as soon as it's passed is really important. And then that key part being that it's an individual right. So it belongs to you as a person, and you get to take action on that. So here's a little bit just overviewing those. There is also a collective right that it creates. So the state is supposed to protect this for all of us. And it also necessitates thinking about the environment, thinking about this right in legislative decisions. So it can be useful both for making laws and for striking down laws after that are potentially not taking care of the environment in the way they should be. Cities can also use it as a protection, as kind of a way to prevent the state from telling them that they can't take steps to do things like Omaha wanted to ban plastic bags at one point, and the state tried to pass a rule that cities couldn't decide to do that. That would be something where the Green Amendment could help a city take some action for their own kind of home rule and individual autonomy. Green amendments will also usually mention some specific values to be protected. So depending on the state that's looking at doing it, you might want to explicitly protect people's rights to be hunting and do things outdoors. You might want to explicitly protect water more if you're in some place like Florida where you have the Everglades, and that's really important. Yeah. So currently there are 3 states that have green amendments. The first one to pass one was Pennsylvania in 1971. The most recent was New York in 2022. And so those have been kind of the way that we've learned about how this works. They've kind of set precedents for how this can be used to help protect the environment in a state, to help protect people in a state. Here you can see the map. All of the lighter green states, those are states that are currently working on passing green amendments. So this is a nationwide effort. There's also work being done to get one at the national level, but obviously that's a lot more difficult, especially given the political climate. So here's kind of your benefits and uses. The obvious one is that you can sue the state if the state violates your right to a healthy environment. It shall hopefully save the state money in the long run because you'll be a lot more conscious of the choices that you're making with legislation, the choices you're making with regulation, and are going to then save money avoiding some of the environmental disasters that you would potentially have to deal with later. Like I said about municipal and local government, you can potentially get a little bit more autonomy to protect your environment locally. And it's a good general accountability thing for the state. So it just gives you another way to hold your government and your representatives accountable for what they're supposed to be doing, which is protecting you, protecting your rights, and making a community that is safe and healthy for you to live in. So here are some key issues that Nebraska has that having a green amendment is really helpful for. Climate change is one of the big ones. Like was said earlier, only Lincoln and Omaha have climate change policies. There's a whole lot of other people in the state who are also going to be impacted by climate change. This would have been helpful for the Keystone XL and the oil pipelines. It gives you just another avenue to get into court to prevent the state from having those go through. It's important for conservation. It gives you another way to try and protect land. And then one of the ongoing problems that Nebraska has is nitrates and other chemicals in the groundwater. This is something that's been going on for 40 plus years. We've known about it for a really long time, and they haven't really done anything about it. The state EPA has said a lot of things about how this is a problem. They've talked about recommendations for things to do, but we've not really taken any major steps to fix the issue. And so having something like a green amendment puts pressure on the state to do it, especially if you're able to sue the state to be like, hey, I'd like to have drinking water that doesn't give me cancer. And then like we were talking about earlier, again, getting some city autonomy and accountability. So I'm gonna go ahead and hand it over to Senator Dungan now, because we'll talk a little bit about the amendment process.
Thank you. Oh, I don't have any PowerPoint slides, so I will put that down. Thank you all for having me here. So my name is George Dungan, as they said, and I am the state senator that represents Northeast Lincoln, Legislative District 26, which we are very close to right here. So I drove not that far from my house to get here today. I don't want to take a ton of time talking about the process because I do want to leave time for questions if anybody has it. But I do want to kind of update people as to how we got to where we are today and what we have moving forward with regards to the Green Amendment. So this actually landed on my desk because I came to the Youth Climate Summit a year ago. So I came here and I was speaking about the environmental bills that I'd brought in the past with regards to solar panels and things like that. And I heard Sheridan speak. And after hearing Sheridan talk about the Green Amendment and then talking with Ken Winston as well as others, I got really excited about the possibility of this Green Amendment. And I would say generally, and I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here, this is probably one of the most important pieces of legislation that I've brought, and it's probably one of the most important pieces of legislation that we could possibly pass moving forward. And the reason for that is it actually is existential, right? Environmental issues, climate issues are an actual existential threat to all of us. And when I talk to people about what matters to them, especially younger folks, it's climate and environmental issues that I hear time and time again. I was actually speaking to my old Boy Scout troop like 6 months ago. So I was talking to like young Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts, and they were probably like 9 years old, 10 years old. And I asked them, you know, what's the most important issue to you all? And when you talk to adults, a lot of times you hear things like property taxes and stuff like that. These 9-year-olds were like, are you gonna make sure that the lakes I swim in are safe? And they said, can you make sure that when I walk outside, it's gonna be healthy? I mean, they were bringing these things up, and it wasn't political. It wasn't a left or a right issue. It was just a bunch of kids wanting to make sure that the outside stays healthy and clean. And for me, I think that's one of the best ways to frame this entire debate when we talk about it. For whatever reason, having a healthy environment has become a political issue. It's become hyper-politicized. It's something that people attack each other on. And it couldn't be further from that in reality, right? Making sure that we have a healthy water, healthy air, good climate, clean water, all of those things, those don't know political boundaries. And it's really frustrating to me when they become politicized. And I'm running for re-election right now for my second term in the legislature, and a mailer went out about me to my entire district recently. And one of the things they put in there was that I brought an AOC-style Green Amendment that would make it so gas-powered lawnmowers were banned and that you would have to ask the government before you bought a car. Right? Like, we know that's not what this does. But that's the way these things get politicized. And so it didn't scare me and it doesn't deter me, because I know when I talk to people in the district and in Nebraska, they do care about these things. And when I ask whether or not we should have a constitutional right to clean air and to clean water, most people say, of course. Absolutely, we should have a right against the government infringing on those things. So I was more than happy to bring this legislation. The process in Nebraska to change the Constitution is a little bit different, for those who don't know, than just passing a bill. So if I bring a constitutional amendment, I introduce it like I've brought a new piece of legislation. But what happens is it goes to a committee. That committee has to vote it out of committee with a majority vote. It then has to go to the floor of the legislature, where there's 3 rounds of debate. And then if it passes in the legislature, it goes to a vote of the people. And the people of Nebraska vote on whether or not this is something they want. So that's one thing that I try to convey to my colleagues in the legislature, is that this is an opportunity to let the people decide. This is not us putting our thumb on the scale. It's us saying the people in Nebraska should have a chance to say whether or not they think that we have a constitutional right to clean air and to clean water. And when I talk to folks about that, they seem to generally support it. Now, the problem that we run into in the legislature, sorry, I talk a lot. I'm trying to make sure I'm not running out of time. The problem we run into in the legislature is people don't understand it. So Sheridan has come and testified in the legislature, and we've had a hearing on this now, where we tried very hard to articulate to my colleagues what the Green Amendment is, what it's been used for in other states, and how the impact would actually play out in the state of Nebraska. And I thought we had a fantastic hearing. We had a number of people show up, especially younger people, come and convey to the Natural Resources Committee why this was important to them. And we had a number of folks from all different walks of life come and explain to the state senators what this does, how it operates, and why they think it's important that we as a legislature make that happen. So these are some pictures from the press conference that we had, which was fantastic. These folks marched from the Union all the way down to the Capitol. We had a press conference there where we had news media. We had folks from the Journal Star, the Omaha World Herald, 1011, all sorts of stuff covering this. And then they went from here to the actual committee room. Wow, these are really well timed. Thank you so much. And we actually had so many people show up, we had to set up overflow seats in the hallway, which was really, really cool. Because a lot of the hearings we have in the legislature, you get like 6 people in the room who are falling asleep the whole time. This was a really exciting hearing. And you can see the members of the committee, I think, did a good job of listening. I think they did a good job of paying attention. But what frustrated me was that a number of the people on the committee, I think, didn't take it seriously, if I'm being totally honest with you. And a number of people on the committee thought, oh, this is a fun thing, and then they moved on. What they didn't realize is that I'm very serious about this. And what I think they're starting to realize is that there's a lot of people in the community who are very serious about this. So after we had the hearing, I went and I spoke with a number of my colleagues who were on the Natural Resources Committee. And I was very upfront with them that I expect a vote on this, and that I think we can get this out of committee. The hesitation that they have is, again, based on a lack of understanding. Pretty much every one of my colleagues on the committee who is hesitant to support this thinks that this amendment does something that it doesn't. Similar to the mailer that went out saying this would ban gas-powered lawnmowers, they think that this creates a private right of action. And what I mean by that is they think this allows one individual to sue somebody else. So the thing that kept coming up, for example, was you could see Senator Hughes over there in the brown jacket. She asked me at one point in time whether this would allow one neighbor to sue their other neighbor if they didn't like the fertilizer they were using on their lawn. And I laughed. I'm like, that's not at all what this does. And we were very clear about that. But that's, I think, a highlight of what matters in these kind of conversations. When we're talking about something that is this big, that has this kind of impact, we need to make sure that people are educated about what it actually does, which means we need to be doing that outreach. We need to be talking to our senators. We need to be having these conversations so that way they're not afraid to vote for bills or for constitutional amendments that do these kind of things. So I've continued to have those conversations with my colleagues, and I'll be honest with you, I've gotten a little bit further than I expected. There's certainly no commitments at this juncture from anybody that you wouldn't expect, but we actually had filed what's called an interim study, which is where, as a senator, you can file something called an interim study, where during the interim between sessions, you get together and you can either just do research and give it to members of the committee, or you can actually hold a hearing that looks the same way as a bill hearing, where you bring in experts to come and testify about the issue. The chair of the committee gets to decide whether or not you're going to hold a hearing. And I filed an interim study this interim on the Green Amendment, and was very, very happy that Senator Brandt, who's the chair of the committee, decided to hold a hearing on it. So we actually, on the calendar, had an opportunity to come in and present more about the Green Amendment. Now, unfortunately, that didn't end up happening for a number of reasons, but the main one is that a number of our testifiers who we lined up, who were experts in these subjects, were not able to come testify. And rather than have a hearing where there was not going to be very many people testifying, I decided it was a better use of our time to withdraw the hearing and instead have more one-on-one conversations. So my hope is that between now and the next legislative session, myself, but also experts and other folks who work in this area can reach out to members of the Natural Resources Committee and explain to them what this does, what it doesn't do, and why it's important to the people of Nebraska to make this happen. My read on the situation right now is that I'm maybe one vote away from getting this out of committee. So talking to every member of this committee is really important. And I will tell you this, youth voices matter more to senators than other voices. And that may seem counterintuitive. You may think, oh, well, I'm a young person, why would they listen to me? I promise you, when a younger person comes and talks to a senator, they put their pencil down, they put their phone down, and they actually listen. They pay attention. When these folks came in and testified at our hearing, it mattered, and it had an impact. So this is sort of my call to action for those in the room who think, oh, my voice doesn't matter, or those in the room who think, why would I reach out to a senator? I'm telling you, as somebody who's been in this job now for a number of years, if you reach out not just to your senator, but to any senator, and try to set up a meeting, those cold emails matter. Try to reach out to their offices, try to set up a meeting in person, have that face-to-face interaction, or call them or email them. That's how you actually can make a difference. And if we are one senator away from getting this out of committee, every single voice, every single email makes a difference. So for those who are on the fence about whether or not you want to reach out or have those conversations, there's a number of ways to do it, right? And I think Sheridan's done a really good job of outlining your opportunities here. Calling your senator. Our phone lines are open. There are staff members who take these calls, they take notes about those. Call not just your senator, but any senator, and explain why this is important. Testifying at hearings, if we do have an interim study or if there's another hearing, getting there, testifying, sharing your stories makes a huge impact. In addition to that, there's things we can do outside of the actual legislative process that make an impact. Volunteering, talking to your friends and family, voting, if you're able to vote, huge. Voting, sounds cheesy to bring this up. I know I'm an elected official. Local elections are the antidote to federal elections. If you feel like your voice doesn't matter at the national level, if you feel like you can't move the needle at the national level because you, live in Nebraska or something like that, your vote on a local level can change the entire state. Right now, the Nebraska state legislature, without getting into the weeds, is right on the balancing line of power going one way or the other. I won my last election by 220 votes. and that's in a district of 40,000 people. 220 votes is one afternoon of going out and knocking doors. 220 votes is calling your friends, going to events, talking to people. So if you care about things like the Green Amendment, if you care about things that happen at your local level, getting involved in your local elections, whether it's city council, school board, county board, whatever it is, that is one of the best ways that you can have a positive impact in Nebraska, because if changing our Nebraska state constitution is maybe one senator away from it getting out of committee, think about the impact you can have if you go out and get involved in your local elections. So that's my plug for getting involved. Please, please, please do it. We have a little bit of time left, it looks like, maybe like 8-10 minutes or so. So if there's any questions for either Sheridan or I about the Green Amendment, about the process and how this all works, anything at all, happy to answer those.
So I was actually at the hearing, but obviously there were some concerns about the excessive strain on the judicial system. And Sheridan Macy was talking about the precedents that have been set in the other states who have passed this legislation. But could you give me some individual examples and specifics about like what people can sue for? Is it more like based on corporations that are affecting them, or just government institutions like or instituted programs like water quality?
Yeah, so you can only sue the government, but the government is responsible for doing all of the regulations that are going to decide whether or not a corporation can dump things in the river. So like one of the big cases in New York is getting the government to enforce water protection laws on the Pepsi-Cola company that has been polluting a river there. And so you're suing the state essentially to get the state to take action to protect your rights. And so it may end up being that the state then turns around and fines a company as a result, or it may be that the state changes the law. You as an individual aren't going to get like money or something from suing the state out of this. You're going to get action from the state on your behalf. So like another case example for that was New York also had a waste disposal plant that was causing a lot of odors, a lot of pollution. And a community was really upset about like how terrible this plant was for their little town. And so they sued the state using the Green Amendment, and the state changed some of the rules surrounding that so that the plant would have to stop dumping waste where it was dumping it. For Pennsylvania, they've used it to prevent fracking a couple times by having the state update and actually enforce some of its laws about how fracking can work. They've also used it to protect some forests. There was a city that had pressure being put on it to open an area for logging, and the city essentially said, we can't do that because our Green Amendment prevents us from undermining this right. So. Yeah.
Hi, George. So I'm wondering if there is a specific argument or set of arguments that you have found to be most effective in convincing some of your colleagues that are on the other side of this than you and I. Has there been something specific that's been more effective?
Yeah, so no matter who you talk to in the Nebraska legislature, whether they consider themselves a conservative Republican or a progressive Democrat or not even a Democrat, right? I think most people in the Nebraska legislature consider themselves people who want to be good stewards of the land, right? Agriculture is legitimately the backbone of a lot of our economy here in Nebraska. That may not be as big of a factor in Lincoln and Omaha, but when you're talking to senators from central Nebraska and western Nebraska, they care a lot about having clean water and clean air. What they say they don't like is government telling them what to do, right? That's their whole thing, is they want you to like establish incentives that promote good, healthy water as opposed to punishments. What I try to do when I talk to those folks is that's really what this is, right? The Green Amendment is telling the government, stay out of our business. It's telling the government, be a good steward of the land. Let local political subdivisions, cities, counties, do what they want. The Bill of Rights are individual protections against government overreach, That is the entire point of the Bill of Rights. So when you talk to somebody who fancies themselves maybe a little bit more conservative, I think that being honest about what a Bill of Rights actually is helpful. Because when I talk to my friends, for example, in the Farm Bureau or other ag organizations who maybe are traditionally opposed to some of the things that we talk about in the environmental climate change sphere, when you get down to the nitty gritty and you pull away the political, all of the other BS that goes into the conversation, they will say to you, yeah, of course I want to keep our water healthy. Of course I want clean air. I grow food for our entire state and for the country. I don't want that to be harmed. So finding those connections with people and trying to strip away maybe some of the political hullabaloo that we all get into and saying, what's your point? What do you really care about? And then highlighting that the Green Amendment is keeping the government out of our business. I think that is a helpful conversation to have because it's true and it speaks to the values that those individuals hold near.
I have two questions. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The first question is, well, when I was at the hearing trial, I noticed a lot of people in the opposition talked about the state losing money, effects on taxes, and eminent domain. Does this Green Amendment really have an effect on that? I mean, what I'm really asking is, how can we disprove their main arguments to oppose the Green Amendment?
Well, I'll let Sheridan respond a little bit more about to the specifics. I mean, the short answer is no, right? Like they're conflating a bunch of different issues. And that's the problem we run into in this sphere, right? Whenever we're talking about climate change legislation or talking about environmental protections, the people that come out swinging as really opposed to them, they conflate or mix together like 5 or 6 different things that don't actually have anything to do with each other. And they do it because fear-mongering is effective. The legislature is very susceptible to fear-based arguments, right? So if somebody gets up there and says, well, senators, I understand that Senator Dungan has a really good idea here, but if you pass this legislation, all of your farmers are going to get sued. They're like, oh, geez, we couldn't possibly do that. And so, to my earlier point, I think it's about education. And it's about letting those senators know that's not actually what the impact is. And I think we have to be strong in our stance. I think that the opposition to things like this politically are very willing to come out swinging. They're very willing to stand up for what they believe in, even though it's completely factually wrong, and they just say stuff, right? We need to be able to stand up and stand in our power and be strong about this too. I think that sometimes folks who are in favor of what we're in favor of here are afraid of how they're going to be perceived in the big picture or about the pushback they're going to get. Most people actually agree with us. When you look at the people in the community, I think we are in a position that is actually supported by the people. We just have to be strong in that stance and be unafraid to do that. And if you look nationally, the younger political leaders that are rising right now are rising because they're saying the things they believe in. They're not trying to cater towards some, well, I don't want to piss too many people off. The people who are actually becoming our leaders are being strong. So I think to your point, we need to actually be strong and say the things we believe in and not be afraid.
It's also very funny because a lot of the issues that they bring up, very much like for eminent domain, for example, are things that the Green Amendment would actually help you support. So Nebraska state constitution actually has a clause in it that allows the state to use eminent domain to build oil pipelines. That is not something that most landowners want. That's not something most farmers want because that's gonna leak into your groundwater and make it really hard for you to grow things, much less drink water on your property. So like bringing those things up is also not necessarily helpful for them in the long run because people don't like eminent domain. And the Green Amendment, because it would be in the Bill of Rights and the provision that's in the state constitution is not in the Bill of Rights, would actually override that. And so it would be much harder for the state to use eminent domain against people.
Cool, thank you so much. And then, sorry, the second question me and Kansas had together was, you were talking about going on in the future, you want to do like one-on-one conversations to convince people, but will we see a ballot initiative or any approach like that?
When I first presented this to Ken, this was something that I had worked out a plan for a ballot initiative and looked at it. We want to try the legislative process first for a number of reasons, and Senator Dungan will elaborate on that. But It helps build legislative history, which is really important for when you're trying a case later, just to see like what is the intention of this, like how are we trying to apply it based on like what we were trying to do in the first place. But it's also a really good opportunity for people to actually get to learn about what's going on, get to see what's happening, and kind of get to be involved in that process from the get-go. And so the ballot initiative is definitely something that we would want to look at if we can't make it happen through a legislative process, which hopefully also puts a little bit of pressure on the legislators to take some of those steps.
Yeah, I mean, the only downside to a ballot initiative process is money, right? Anymore, it costs a lot of money to do that. And if you look historically over the last 5 to 8 years of ballot initiatives, whether it's referendums or proactive bills, the ones that have funding from like national supporters or local supporters are the ones that can actually get folks out into the community to collect those signatures. There's a lot of ballot initiatives that get started that just don't have the ability to go to every county and collect a certain amount of signatures. So if there's funding for it, I think it's a great opportunity, but my hope is that we can push it in the legislature first, convince our colleagues as to why it's important, and try to move that forward. But if that doesn't work, then yeah, I think we need to actually make sure the voice of the people gets heard in that circumstance.
Cool, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.